Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how top experts sell their ideas, their value, and their services. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want better clients, bigger deals, and higher fees. You know, I work really hard on this show. I tried to get Captain Kirk from the USS Enterprise, but you know what? I got somebody better. I got Captain Hoff, Mr. Steve Hoffman. Welcome to the Selling Show.
David, it's fantastic to be here.
So you have this amazing, far-reaching background and one of the coolest monikers, Captain Hoff. Give us a little bit of your professional journey that brought you to the work that you're doing today. And then I'm also curious, where did Captain Hoff come from?
So Captain Hoff, to start there, is my gamer handle. So I was a big gamer. I did a lot of startups in my early days. I have designed and produced over 50 games. I had 5 startups, 3 venture-funded startups in Silicon Valley, 2 bootstrap startups, and now I am running one of the world's leading global startup accelerators. It's called Founder Space. We work with hundreds of entrepreneurs all over the world, and I love it.
Tell me a little bit about the gaming, because I'm like an old school retro gamer. So, you know, Atari, Nintendo, Asteroids, Space Invaders.
That's really old school. I
school.
remember those games. I played them. They're fantastic. Games have come a long way. So yes, I did gaming. Early on in my career, I was actually working in Hollywood. So I was a TV development exec. I also have an engineering background, and I really wanted to combine entertainment with technology. And when I was in Hollywood, I met the founder of one of the world's largest game companies. At the time, it was the largest, Sega. They had just surpassed Nintendo.
Right.
And the founder wanted to bring somebody from Hollywood to their Japan headquarters. So I said, absolutely. I want to go to Japan. It would be an amazing experience. And I could produce and design games out of Sega. So I did that for a year, a fantastic experience. And then I got the entrepreneurial itch. I was still very young, and I wanted to found my own company, my own game company. So I came back to Silicon Valley and launched my first game company, LavaMind. And my first game that I ever made was called Gazillionaire, which, what is it? It's how to become a gazillionaire, which we all want to do. So ironically, I work with entrepreneurs now trying to teach them how to become gazillionaires. Well, I wrote the game Gazillionaire, became a big hit, a really popular game out there. I went on to produce a bunch of other games. I just kept doing it, did it at several companies, and segued my way into working with entrepreneurs. Now I fund these companies. So not only do I help them raise capital, but I also fund them. And I've specialized lately in helping startups from overseas enter the US market. A lot of people don't know this, but over half the venture funded startups in Silicon Valley were started by a foreigner, an immigrant. Because people are coming here from all over the world. That's why Silicon Valley is so dynamic. We're draining the best talent from globally into our pockets, and they're starting these companies. So what I do is I'm constantly traveling 70% of the time. I was just in Europe last month. I'll be going back to Europe in 2 weeks. Then I'm off to Korea to meet with all these Korean startups, work with the government there. Then of all places, I'm going to Kazakhstan. I'll meet the president of Kazakhstan, work with their startups, educate them and get them over here. And for me, it's a really exciting business. I love it.
Amazing. Really, really amazing. Well, your book, and you've got several books out there, which we'll get to. I want to start with Surviving a Startup, that has a really great subtitle, Practical Strategies for Starting a Business, Overcoming Obstacles, and Coming Out on Top. And you and I are both HarperCollins Leadership authors, because my books are also from HarperCollins Leadership. So nice to be in the family. One of the things I want to ask you about with this book, the publication date was April 20th, 2021. Knowing what lead times are, you must have written this book hot and heavy right at the beginning and the middle of the pandemic, right? So maybe about a year before April into summer of 2020. It was hard enough before the pandemic. How did the kind of the global situation as you were writing this book And now, of course, we're post-pandemic, hopefully, capital P, post-pandemic. How has life changed for startup entrepreneurs since, you wrote this book hot and heavy in the middle of that huge upheaval?
Well, the book itself is basically a compilation of everything I've learned, like on my own venture funded startups, running founder space, working with hundreds of entrepreneurs, problem solving, every obstacle founders face, I put into that book because either I faced it personally or entrepreneurs I'm working with have faced it. And, how do you survive? Like, that's the key question. Now, the world has shifted a lot. During the pandemic, it was bad for certain companies. Like if you had a retail business or anything like that, really tough travel, really tough. However, if you were a tech startup, it was boom time. Like it was people stuck at home, they're online, they're doing stuff online. These companies went crazy, as we saw. Their valuations went up like crazy. Now they're down because the pandemic is ebbing. And what I see right now is technology is going to keep going. Markets go up and down, things change. We'll have a pandemic and it'll be over. My business personally, working with startups globally, coming to America, is just quadrupled in the past couple months. Like literally during the pandemic, people didn't travel. So a lot of overseas startups and even US, it was hard for them to come here. Conferences weren't going, things like that. So now that things are opening up, and we ran a physical incubator, like physical spaces. So we had to shut those down. Now we can open everything up and we're doing everything again. So it's really good times for me personally. For startups, it continues to be good times. Now the market's a little tougher now. Like literally a year ago, valuations were double in Silicon Valley, double the valuation. So the valuations have come down in half for the most part. Unless you're a really hot startup, then it's always good. If everybody's competing to get in the deal, you can always get in a good thing. It's, sales, right? 101. But right. If you're not a hot startup, if you're not like one of the hottest startups, you're just a good startup, it's a much tougher to raise capital. So that's the situation.
Interesting. So whether we're after funding right now or just kind of starting up any sort of company, there's a lot of corporate executives that are hanging out their own shingle. They want to do what you and I do, speak, write books, do all of this great stuff, run seminars and training workshops. I know that part of what you lay out in some detail in surviving a startup is some of the major challenges that every entrepreneur faces. What's some of the common problematic DNA that you see out there?
The biggest problem entrepreneurs have is they believe in their product, but the customers don't care. I have a rule about products, and this is if you're selling a product too. And this, you're in sales, right? If a customer looks at your product and they go, oh, that's nice, that's pretty good, they will never buy it because they're too busy. Nobody needs a nice product, a nice to have product, a pretty good product. We all go for the very best and we all go for what we absolutely need. So if you haven't hit that, if you haven't figured that out, and it has to be for somebody to really need it and you're a startup, it means it has to be unique. It has to be new. It has to be either exponentially better or very different, solving a different problem, providing a different value. If you haven't figured those things out, which are really hard, like this is why these companies become unicorns, billion-dollar businesses, because it's not easy. If it was easy, we'd all be billionaires. Like everybody would be a billionaire. It's really hard to figure that out. When they figure that out, that's when things start to take off. And then in the book, I also talk a lot of, I talk about the whole process, like everything from, validating your concept, going through the process of launching, go-to-market strategy, towards fundraising, how do you get that initial angel capital in, and then larger rounds, how do you close those deals, to how do you close business? Like, how do you sell customers? And I know we're going to talk about that today. What do entrepreneurs and really every business person out there, what steps do you need to go through when you engage different types of customers? And there's different ways to sell. There's online selling, where it's all about, targeting either on Facebook or Google, the exact customer you want with the exact message they're going to respond to and driving them into a funnel and then, narrowing down that funnel and then basically converting them. That's one way. And that can be all automated, like online. And then there's the way where you have to go face to face. And I am particularly focused on entrepreneurs who want to close transformative deals, or anybody out there. And by transformative, I mean, it's not just I sell another widget, right? It's how do I close big deals that will absolutely transform my business? That either can be a funding deal, could be a major customer. Like there's a major customer. If I get that customer, my God, a lot of businesses, whether you're a small business, especially, or medium-sized business, one deal can change your whole trajectory. Like literally that client could become like that, make you millions, like from zero to millions. So how do you get those deals? How do you push them through? How do you navigate that process? And then how do you negotiate them?
Hey, if you're loving this episode as much as I am, pop over to doitmarketing.com/manifesto and get your free 37-page download guide to how to sell smarter, sell more easily, sell more often. That's what we're here to help you with at The Selling Show. Off you go. I want to ask you, because we had another guest on here about maybe 30 or 40 episodes ago, Derek Sivers, who is the founder of CD Baby and just brilliant guy, investor, etc. He's got some kind of contrarian views. And of course, everyone has their own opinions, right? He talks about when you're building a company, the last thing you should worry about is your exit strategy. We're going to be acquired. Google's going to buy us. Apple's going to buy us. And he says, you got to just work with what you have, where you are, find customers, sell stuff, improve the product, improve the experience, build your reputation, and do not worry for a second about, will investors like it? Is this going to be an exitable business? Is this going to be a saleable business? What's your take on that from the very beginning? Should we have that in mind, or does that kind of pollute our thinking sometimes?
It's almost irrelevant. You can say Apple's going to buy us, Google's going to buy us. Well, you got a long way to go before that day comes. So thinking about it doesn't really move your business forward. And that's what he's saying. He's saying, like, look at the real problems of growing this business. And the real problems usually stem from your customer. Like, am I meeting a unique need and filling that need either much better than anybody else, or a need that they're just not being met? The rest of the stuff will take care of itself. And honestly, an investor, like I wear investor hat too now, when I look at a company, I don't really care who's going to acquire them or whether they go public or whatever, but I do care that they grow like crazy, because I know if it's growing like crazy, there's going to be an exit. And if it's a big market out there that they're addressing, they've really figured something out, there's going to be an exit. Trying to map it out from the beginning is kind of silly. Like, it's a losing strategy. So yes, I would agree with that thinking.
And I also, you've got some great ideas. I want to kind of tap into the first section of the book, which is about really defining the problem and moving from that nice to have category to the have to have category. And then, your elevator pitch, and then what you might need to change or throw out along the way. Talk a little bit about how all of that works, because, focus groups famously ineffective. There has to be a way that we tap in to that target market, what they really want, what they really need, what they're really excited about. Sometimes they themselves don't know it, right? Famous Steve Jobs story. How do we vet that idea? Because you talked about kind of vetting and validating. How do we do that in a way that actually works and isn't just based on surveys and focus groups?
Yeah, so surveys and focus groups are fine, but they're not that useful at an early stage. If you have a refined product and you want to get some customer feedback, maybe, assuming that people want to give you an accurate, take the time to fill out your survey or whatever. And focus groups are notoriously problematic because one person can skew the entire group. Also, the group might be, how many people are in this group? How were they selected? Who are they? There's group mentality and group think. It's really hard to get great feedback out of those. The best feedback you get are when you put the product into the customer's hand. I mean, there is no substitute for seeing what customers do with your product. And I can give you a few examples. So, if you have a software product and you get up on what we call a minimum viable product or a basic version, even a prototype, into the customer's hand, and they can start using it, then you can start to get really meaningful feedback from them. You can actually use analytics now, because if it's software, especially, if it's not a broom or something, like if it's software, if it has a way to connect to the internet, you can start to see how they use it. Which features do they use? What do they use? And that may surprise you. So a lot of companies out there, like, let's just take one everybody knows, Yelp. When Yelp put it out there, the reviews were an afterthought. They said, oh, we'll add reviews to this. Like, they didn't think people wanted to rate places. It seems absurd now. But at the time, they were like, oh no, people just want to find out what the restaurants are and other stuff. They don't really want to rate them. But if they do, we'll put this in here. Turned out to be the whole thing. Like that was Yelp. The reviews are the only thing people cared about. None of the other stuff that they were thinking mattered. Instagram originally made an entire mobile social network. Nobody cared about it. They looked at what people were actually doing in the app and they said, oh, all people care about are these fun filters we put in on their photos. And then they want to share them on Facebook. So they scaled the app down and they rebranded it Instagram. It was called Bourbon. And boom, they put it out there. That's what people cared about. Now, these are online apps, so it's easy to gather analytics. How do you do it when you're doing a strategic sale to B2B or places like that? Still, if there's any online component, like if you're selling a SaaS product or there's any way for your customers to gauge online, you should use the analytics. You should do a lot of A/B testing. Like, don't use focus groups. Like, do you think they want this feature? Well, put up, a version of the feature. And if they aren't using it, guess what? I don't care if you spent 6 months developing it and $500,000, pull it down. Like, it's just cluttering up whatever your service is. This is true of any product. I call it getting inside your customer's head, like really seeing the world through their eyes, which it's really hard to do when you've made this product or service. It's your baby. You think you know best, but it doesn't matter how much you care about your product. It doesn't matter how much you love it and how great you think all the features are. The only thing that matters is whether your customer loves it, like really. And so being able to pivot around and look at your product from their point of view, really important. And I'll give you 3 steps that I give entrepreneurs at the beginning. Number 1, go early. Like, get whatever you have, like even if it's not fully developed, your product or service, get it in front of customers, like when it's just a PowerPoint or when it's, just a concept in your head. Like, you start talking to them right now. This is a continual process. It doesn't end. Number 2, if you're not hitting an extreme pain point, an extreme need, if they're looking at it, like I said before, and saying that's nice to have, you have no business being in business, right? Like, literally, if they aren't going, oh my God, can I have that today? Like, I didn't know this existed, like Steve Jobs, I didn't think this was possible, but this really, I need it, right? It solves my problem. It'll, get me more revenue. It'll make me more efficient. It'll allow me to do this task I wasn't able to do or took so long to do. How can I get that? If they aren't giving you that response, you're not going to get business. My rule of thumb is if it's not in their top 5 priorities, they will never think about it again. We're too busy. Like, we have our top 5. All these people contact us on LinkedIn and other places like, you want to do this? You want to do that? You're like, oh, that sounds interesting. Boom. I'm on to the next thing. So it's got to be in their top 5. You got to do that. And number 3, when you are engaging with these at an early stage in the product development cycle, but even later on, you really need to do what I call embedding yourself with your customer. And this is good, especially if you're in the kind of development phase. It's like most of the great innovations happen from people from the outside of a business. They aren't in the business. Why? Because people who are in the business are too busy doing the business to innovate. They're like worried about their bottom line. They're worried about this. So if you're in the restaurant business, usually you're not the one creating the next great restaurant technology. If you're in, the food industry, like you're a farmer, you're not creating the next ag tech revolution. You're farming. So what you need to do as an entrepreneur, as a business person, is get in with, like, if you're going to sell a new product to farmers, don't spend a year building the product. Go out to farms, meet the farmers, start looking at their daily, like, where are they struggling? What could provide them value? And then start engaging with them. And even Steve Jobs, who famously said, customers don't know what they need. You have to tell them. That's true and not true. Steve Jobs, when he launched his products, he wasn't stupid. Like, he didn't come out there telling people what they need. You can't create demand. Honestly, like, you can imagine the most incredible product in the world. You can build the perfect product. You can add all the bells and whistles. But if the demand isn't out there, nothing will happen. It's like trying to sell a boat to nomads in the desert. They're like, this is the best yacht I've ever seen, but we're in the middle of the desert. Like, we don't care.
Right.
Like, we don't need. But what Steve Jobs did, if you look historically, he already knew when he launched, the Apple computer, the first computer, he already knew there was a market for these computers, huge hobbyist market and growing into business market. Like he saw it was there. He just built a better one. Like he innovated on building better. When he launched the iPod, well, he launched the graphical user interface on the Mac. He didn't invent that even graphical user interface. He basically saw, well, people were buying his computers already. His Apple II computer was a big hit. And then he saw, well, I could make this better. Look what Xerox PARC is doing. I'll borrow their technology and their ideas and put it on top of what I've already built and sell more. When he launched the iPod, huge market for MP3 players. He didn't come out of nowhere. He wasn't the one who invented MP3 players. No, he just made them a lot better, a lot easier to use. He built the whole ecosystem. He was brilliant. There was demand, is what I'm saying. He didn't tell people you need an MP3 player. He saw people are buying them. I can make a much better one and they're going to buy more. Same with the iPhone. The iPhone wasn't the first graphical. They had the Sidekick out there. Most people don't remember. The Palm Pilot came way before the iPhone. They were selling like crazy too, but he made it much, much better. He was brilliant at that. So there was already demand. You cannot create demand. So when you are going into any marketplace to sell, the demand has to be there. And your job as an entrepreneur, business person, even if you're in a big corporation starting a new innovative product line, is to hunt for that demand. Literally, you have to identify the demand, and then you have to identify what you can do either exponentially better. And you see, Steve Jobs really didn't create demand. He created exponentially better products. Every one of his products, the Mac was exponentially better than any other computer out there in terms of user interface and usability, right? The iPod exponentially better as a music downloading with a whole ecosystem, iTunes tied in. Nobody had that. The iPhone exponentially better, easier to use, just so innovative. That's what he did. So that's what you need to do. You need to identify where there's extreme demand and figure out where you can add value. Then you can start selling. In fact, great products sell themselves. So, the hard part is getting a great product, but then, a lot of I think what we're going to talk about is strategic sales. How do you do strategic selling into big corporations? That requires another set of knowledge, which we'll go into.
Yes. Well, let's go there now. That's very, very exciting. Assuming that you've done your work on what you just shared, kind of breaking in. And again, I shouldn't say breaking into the corporate fortress, because there's some small and medium-sized companies where there's plenty of business to be had. It doesn't have to be breaking into a Fortune 500 company. But whatever a CEO, whatever a high-level VP at a big major company, tapping into their strategic priorities, tapping into their strategic initiatives, knowing where they're going, and then showing up on their doorstep with a way to get them there faster, safer, shorter, or smarter, or safer, right? More reliably. How do we do that if we're sort of a professional services seller? You don't want to show up just like another consultant, just like another service provider. You have to show up with something, I think, pretty exciting and highly, highly relevant. What are some sources of tapping into that relevance or tapping into that prospecting intelligence, doing intelligent prospecting?
Right. And that's the most important thing, because you can waste a huge amount of time just talking to random people in these big corporations. You may be talking to people who have no power to pull the trigger on actually even hiring you, but they're curious, or you got through to them through some friend or something and they're trying to be helpful. Identifying the right people in the organization. So whenever you engage with somebody in a company, like large, medium, small, well, whoever they are, right? Small is pretty easy, but medium and large gets really tricky. Are you talking to the right person? You need to figure out who makes these decisions. Who is the one that will actually decide whether, if I'm selling into you, that I say yes. And sometimes it's multiple people. Then it becomes more complicated. So getting at least somebody in a position of influence in the company who can be your champion, who can help you navigate the company. But how do you do that? People are busy. Why would they want to be your champion? You're another service provider. You're another, you're selling something into that company. Why do they want to waste their time with you? Well, people are busy. People are going to do things that map to their 5 priorities, right? So what is their 5 priority in this company? Is it most likely it's getting a promotion, solving problems in their group or their business unit that they can solve, getting recognition from their peers, hitting a bottom line? What is it in it for them that they will bend over backwards to do? A lot of times, initially, it's somebody that you connected with who refers you. Another customer referred you in to them, a business associate that you're working with, in some way, knew them, you got in the door. First thing you need to do is listen to them, like talk to them at a deep level about what issues they're facing. And I found sometimes people want something that your product or service doesn't solve. Like they're not your customer. They're not going to buy it from you in this organization, but you could help them with something else. Like they need to get through to somebody for themselves that you might have relationships for. So start there. Start with, oh, Jason put us together. Like Jason introduced us. What issues are you having? I'm very well connected. That's what I do with my life. Can I help you connect with people in my industry? This is what I do. I know a lot of people. Start to figure out by asking them a series of questions about what their most pressing needs are. See if you can help them. Then a lot of times they'll return the favor. Like they'll be like very motivated because you're helping them to return. Reciprocity is a key, right? So reciprocity. Number two, even better though, is if in their job, you can actually make them shine. Like you can make them look great in that company for recommending you. How do you compete? Like it's a crowded market, especially if you get into service providers, other people like that. How do they distinguish that you have something that somebody else doesn't? Like this again comes back to what is your unique value? Now, this past couple months have been huge for me because things are opening back up. The world is opening back up. I just closed 2 transformative deals. How did I do that? People I had worked with in the past, told the person recommended me and told them what a great job I did. Like, how great Founder Space is, our accelerator. So these other foreign partners came to us and said, we got to work with you. Like, I trust this other person. They recommended you. The other thing is being very focused. Like if you're broadly focused, you're going to need different pitches for different customers. So if you're a broadly focused service provider and you do a lot of different things, forget about all the other things. Only pitch what they care about, like what adds value to them. And this requires, like you said, intelligence. What are they lacking? What aren't they getting from their service providers or their whoever's selling into them? You need to know that at a deep level. So you need to go around the industry to either people who are in that organization, who work with that organization, who can start to shed light on that. So if you start pitching them some general thing, they're just going to tune out. Like especially on a LinkedIn thing or a cold email or a cold call or, you're networking at a conference. If it's just general, they're going to tune out. Like it needs to be very targeted towards pain points that organization is having. And then you need to be able to articulate in a very clear way the unique solutions that you bring to the table. Like what are those solutions? How have you gained expertise, insight, capabilities that your competitors don't have? And why? That story needs to be developed. And if you haven't developed that story, going over those 3 points, capabilities, like why are you so capable that these other people aren't? What insights do you have the business over your years of doing this business that they could benefit from that other people can't? Will you come in to their business and start to change things in a very positive way? Like show that. You need to demonstrate that. Like, do you have case studies? Do you have data that can actually show, like, you're selling in a service that increases their revenue? Like for all our customers, like we can actually take you through their story and show you how their revenue increased after working with us for 6 months. Something like that, that's tangible, not just that general, we're better than them. We're great. That doesn't sell.
Wait. We're not just going to listen to this episode. There are downloads, there are resources, there are links, there are bonuses waiting for you on this episode's page when you go over to doitmarketing.com/podcast. That's right, doitmarketing.com/podcast. Grab the notes right under this episode. See you over there. It's funny. I think it was Jim Keenan, who's another sales author. He said, number one, never combine a discovery call with a demo if you're dealing with software. You need to do the deep dive discovery, Steve, the way that you're talking about it.
Yes.
And he says, here's the test. When it comes time for the demo, you must never use the word if. So if you have this problem, because that's where you're getting, you should know what problems they have. You should know what problems they don't have. If you purge the word if from your demo, for problem X that you told me about, we can do Y and Z 30% faster and with 100% accuracy. Because of problem Y, this is what we do. This is how it works. This is how it's relevant. This is how it solves the problem. And because you said Z was the most important decision criteria that you have, here's all of our ZZZ features and capabilities, and that's what's going to solve your problem. It's not if you ever wanted to broadcast to your entire database, if you have external partners. No ifs in any demo. That means you've done enough discovery where the demo becomes a slam dunk.
Yeah, because if you're doing ifs, it means you don't know. You haven't done your own work, right? You should know exactly what they're doing before you go in to do the demo, because otherwise you're going to be pitching the demo in entirely the wrong way, focusing on the wrong thing. And they probably don't care about 70% of what you say in a
totally. I love what you said about prune everything else away. Only focus on what applies to them.
30% that applies to them is all that matters to them, and that's their universe. And that's all you should be. So many salespeople try to tell them about every feature they have. That doesn't do you any good. You're boring them. And you're wasting their time, and all you're showing them is that you are wasting their time. Like, you're not showing them that you're that you actually know their business.
Let me change gears. And there's something that's been happening for the last 5 or 10 years that I think may be a mystery to some of our listeners. And it's these innovation labs inside large companies, right? Like the Skunk Works and, places where they've sort of partitioned off. And now Amazon does this, Google does this. A lot of the major tech companies do this. How is it different when you're talking to the head of an innovation lab inside a large company that's sort of like a startup, but inside a big behemoth?
Yeah. So these guys, the reason they section it off is because in these big companies, they become like dinosaurs. Like, people don't want to change. They're focused on the way they do stuff. And if they try to launch an innovative product, it just gets killed or diluted, or, it gets lost in the morass. So they try to empower these separate groups to actually innovate and go forward. I've done lots of corporate consulting for companies like Bosch and Huawei and Intel and huge companies, Deloitte, talking specifically about innovation. Like my book, Make Elephants Fly, all about this, like all about how you innovate inside organizations, how innovation works, how you think like a startup. Problem in these innovation labs, it can be frustrating. I've been invited in to these Fortune 500 companies to help them innovate. You get in there, and I've had these groups of, first of all, the way they choose who's the innovators is often wrong. They'll run a committee of these corporate execs who then they have everybody in the company submit ideas on how to innovate. Then they choose the best ideas. I'm like, totally wrong. Totally wrong. First of all, you're telling us with the best ideas, they're probably going to be the most conservative ideas that align already with what you're already doing. They're not going to be truly innovative ideas. So you're going to be filtering this stuff out. The truly innovative ideas come from left field. They go against a lot of what everybody thinks in the organization. Secondly, you're choosing the idea, not the person. And a lot of times they'll get a great idea. It'll, 1 out of 20 ideas will be great, but they'll have the wrong person. The person who thought it up isn't necessarily the person who's good at executing and innovating. They're not an entrepreneur. They just happen to see a problem that could be solved. You need to choose the people. The people are all that matters. So pick the people who are true innovators, who are always challenging orthodoxy, who are always looking outside and all the new technologies and ideas and ways of doing stuff, and want to bring those processes into the corporation. Empower those people to actually go out. Don't run a contest. Number two, in the corporate innovation, when I go in there, a lot of these groups that were innovating, they have to sell it internally, right? And once they do, it sort of calcifies things. So I went into a group that had made an amazing medical breakthrough, in this big giant, I won't tell you the company, huge company, one of the biggest in the world. They had made this medical breakthrough for this surgical way of doing surgery. And it was absolutely so much better for doctors, for patients, everything. And the first question I asked, are you selling? Are they going to buy? Have you got pre-orders? It's you can build this. This is pretty amazing. They're like, actually, we're having trouble. I'm like, you're having trouble? What's the trouble? And they're like, well, doctors love it, patients love it, but hospitals don't want to change the way they do stuff. Like this would require them to change their whole surgical procedure for everything. They don't want to do that. Oh my God. Like, so you've approved this, but you've hit a roadblock. Clearly the hospitals aren't going to change how they do things. You can't convince them to change because they don't care, right? they just want to keep doing stuff the old way, even though this would be very helpful. It's not a big enough problem that they're going to change. So I go, well, go tell your boss this doesn't work. We're going to have to iterate again. We're going to have to, pivot, as we call it in startup world, start a new week. They go, I can't. What, you can't? No. We told our boss already. And our boss said, well, we've already approved the funding. Keep doing this. That boss already sold it to their boss who sold it to their boss. We can't change. It's like, then you're just wasting the money. So this is the headache that you asked me, like these people in the innovation groups, like even when you can identify where they should be changing, a lot of times the corporate structure won't let them change. So not giving them enough freedom to actually kill projects. A lot of times it's kill projects and kill them fast while saving face is a really important thing that needs to happen. And it needs to happen from the top down. Because if you don't do it, then people get trapped in these innovation groups that aren't really innovating.
Wow. Well, I want to go behind the scenes because obviously you have such a great handle on all of this. Tell me a little bit about Founder Space and the different services and the different programs that you have. I know there's startup acceleration, there's venture capital, there's your own innovation lab. Give us kind of the landscape of you as a consultant, as a founder yourself. How did you go into your expert-based business? How did these services and divisions kind of crop up over time?
Yeah, so we do a lot of things. So we help early stage entrepreneurs launch their companies, go to market. Doesn't matter if they're foreign or the US. We don't care, right?
And it's usually tech.
It's usually tech because tech are the ones that can raise venture capital.
Yeah.
It's very hard to scale a human-based business that's based on growing talent because, as you know, it's hard to acquire the talent to do that. They grow slowly. They grow over time.
You wouldn't do like a food startup, for example.
No, we would if that food startup was innovating on food delivery, innovating on food types, creating a whole new category of food.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But if you're just delivering food, you're just doing what everybody else does in the industry, we're not interested. If you just own a restaurant, we're not interested. You gotta have something like Lululemon, like it's a clothing company, right? Not really any new tech when they started, but they identified a new market. Like they said, we're going to laser focus on yoga. This is a huge and growing market right now. This is a trend. That would be a company we'd jump into, totally venture fundable. That company has the potential. We don't care what you do. If you can prove to us you can grow exponentially, we're interested. That's the bottom line. Can you grow exponentially? Yes. If you can't, don't care. Tech, great. No tech, don't care. But it tends to be tech companies are easier to grow exponentially, just on average, because tech opens all these doors to doing things in new ways that you couldn't do. It's just much easier. It's much harder. The other ideas are more rare. So that's why the majority is tech. The other thing is we have our own venture fund, smaller venture fund for early stage startups. We work with a lot of big VCs all around the world, like the funds, the startups as they grow. It's a big part of what we do. We go deep on their business models like we're doing now, like all the different areas, like for consulting. We work with startups in our programs. We run programs. We also work. So there are two models. If you're going to be in one of our programs, you have to have an exponentially growing company. If you have a more linear growth company, we will still consult with you as a consultant, right? So we work with consultants for everything from small, medium, and especially large corporations. We go in there and we basically say, what we give you that, like our pitch is, like what we give you that other people don't, is we're looking at hundreds of startups a year. We're looking at all this new technology. We're looking at innovation across all these sectors. We can bring that thinking to your organization, right? And we can help you see opportunities and solve problems and plot a path that you otherwise simply wouldn't be able to see because you're not in our shoes. So we might not know your business as well as you do, but you don't also get an insight like this. What we're going to do is combine those. And that's our unique value proposition. So those are the things we do. I love doing all of it because they all help each other. Like every time we work with a startup, we're not only helping that startup connect with bigger players in the industry and other players and customers, they need to sell in, but we're also helping the bigger players be aware of the startup. So playing matchmaker in that respect.
Yeah. How about that? What are your thoughts on kind of old line companies buying up tech companies to get that innovation edge and sort of buy their way, if you will, or acquire their way to an innovative future. So for example, a beer company buying some kind of beverage technology thing, or Walmart buying some kind of online distribution super duper software. Does that work? Or what's the track record there of big companies buying their way into a tech future?
It's hit or miss. So a lot of it depends on the culture of the big company. The easy part is writing the check. The hard part is integrating that company. Like, how do you integrate that startup culture, that startup business without squashing it, especially if it's if it's more mature, it's easier to integrate, but still challenging. So the big thing these companies face is integrating them. You saw Fox bought MySpace in the early days, right? But MySpace no longer exists. It was Facebook that ended up, becoming the thing. Was MySpace a bad acquisition? Well, Fox didn't know what to do with MySpace. They couldn't really help MySpace. And MySpace had like the first iteration right, but they never got on to the second or third, right? And being bought by Fox might have contributed to that. I don't know. You can't see the inside, but they paid, I think I remember, $400 million or something, and it just ended up going away. This happens all the time. When you need to buy the right company and it needs to align with your corporate goals. Like, you can't just buy a random company and integrate it. It's just not going to work. It needs to align with your strengths. So it needs to align with your culture, your company culture, your strengths. There are certain companies that are really good at buying and integrating companies. And a lot of times they're good for a period of time while their management is right. And then their management changes. It's no longer the case. GE used to be great at this, right? And now GE, it's not even GE anymore. Like, it's not what it used to be. You look at Amazon, they're still really good at it. They're on the ball with tech. They have this huge, massive organization. And when they buy a company, and I think they just bought a healthcare company in Silicon Valley, they're buying companies all the time. They bought Zappos. They bought, throughout their history, they're just buying, I think they bought diapers.com, a huge list of companies, and they've integrated them amazingly well for a big company. So that's the answer to you. And it's a very complex thing. We could talk for hours about it. I won't go further.
Right. Well, Captain, I'm curious, what do we have for the crew? Where can we send people? What resources? Where should they go to get connected and stay connected to more Captain Hoff brilliance?
Thank you. So if anybody wants to reach out to me for any reason, just go to foundersspace.com. There's a contact form there. Put my name in. I respond to the emails. Tons of videos. We have a podcast on there, our Founders Space podcast. And another way to reach me, which some people prefer, is I'm on every social network. Search for Captain Hoff or Founders Space. You will find me. LinkedIn is a great one. I respond to every LinkedIn message. Just reach out, contact me. Always looking to work with great people, like really people who are pushing their limits. If you are hell-bent on changing your industry, I want to talk to you.
Love it. And don't forget the 3 amazing books, Make Elephants Fly, Surviving a Startup. And we didn't even scratch the surface of the latest book, which is The 5 Forces That Change Everything. If you want to upgrade your brain, just go buy The 5 Forces That Change Everything, and you will have a 5-year jump start on all your competition. Really, really amazing. Well, Captain, I appreciate you. This was totally fantastic. We have to have you back because we literally could talk for hours about these other topics.
I feel we could.
We probably should. So great to have you on this time. More to come.
Thank you.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.